sitting over in the choir, looking at the sun pouring in from those back windows, and obviously not paying attention to what is going on in the service. All I could think about was the possibility that we might have a thaw, but not just a thawing out of this cold, cold winter, but one final one that lasts for a few months and not just a few hours. Wouldn't it be nice to have a thaw? Spring has arrived on the calendar, but on the calendar only. Yesterday, you would not have thought that we were past March 21st. And if there's ever a winter that we needed a good and thorough thawing out, one that lasts for months and months, it would be this winter. Well, one of the ways that I avoid the coldness, and those of you who know me know that Craig and I do this every year, we hide out in Tower City Center at the Cleveland International Film Festival. Did not get to it nearly as much this last week as I wanted, but yesterday we just laughed as we looked out the big windows of Tower City and saw the snow coming down. That was, of course, until we had to finally come home last night. But they show some amazing films, and they really do transport you around the world. And one of the films that I have talked about before, I want to talk about again. It is hands down one of my all-time favorite films at the festival. It is a German film from a few years ago called Vincent Wants to See. Only there's a play on the word here because it is spelled S-E-A. Vincent Wants to See. It's about a young adult, Vincent, who is grieving the death of his mother. His mother died in an untimely way, unexpected. His father has decided that because Vincent has Tourette's syndrome, most of us know Tourette's as someone who has these uncontrollable tics and movements, and sometimes has very inappropriate verbal outbursts, that the father has decided he cannot take care of the son alone at home. And so he puts him into a residential treatment facility. Now, in this facility, Vincent's roommate is Alexander. Alexander struggles with obsessive-compulsive disorder. Now, not in the way you and I joke about it, because those who really have it know it is not a joke. And in the movie, you know he has this because he spends an inordinate amount of time organizing his room, or at least his half of the room, and he has many miniature soldiers that are lined up in a very particular fashion, and he knows when one has been moved by a hair length. Also in this facility, Vincent comes to know Marie. Marie is dealing with extreme anorexia. Now, one night, Marie is the one who decides she is going to run away. She's going to run away by stealing the head therapist's car in order to avoid being put on a feeding tube, which is the last effort the therapist has come up with in trying to get food into Marie. She invites Vincent to go with her. There's a little bit of a spark of love interest going on there. But in the process, Alexander finds out about this, and because of his need to have things in order, he feels compelled to report it. So they kidnap Alexander, and the three of them go on a road trip. The best kind of movie you could have, a road trip. And their road trip is to fulfill Vincent's long-held desire to go to the sea. The sea coast. It becomes not just a journey, as Michelle talked about in the Children's Minute, it becomes a car chase when Vincent's father gets wind of this. And being an up-and-coming politician, he knows that his reputation is at stake should folks find out his son has done this. And because it is the head therapist's car, she demands to go along with them. So, and there's a little spark that goes on there too, as you might imagine. But now the true beauty of this movie is it moves from a classic hardness and coldness and frigidity to a thawing and a warming in people's hearts and lives. Early on, it is clear that every person is frozen in time in their own understanding of themselves and each other. How many of you all have met someone who, the moment you meet them, you realize they are frozen in time? That house has been built, and there are no additions going on to it. How many times have you felt that very same way? Where things are happening around you that are exciting and innovative and new, and you can't do anything but just stay in that same place. Whether it's because of your own grief or your own illness or because of your own limited vision. Well, Vincent is frozen into thinking that he cannot live without his mother. He is deep in grief. Vincent's father is frozen into thinking that the only way he can have this political career is to have a perfect family, and he now has a dead wife and a son with an incurable illness. Marie is frozen into thinking that death is her only way to get out of the pain of life. How many of us have been there where that seemed like the only option? The lead therapist is frozen into thinking there is only one way to solve each of these persons' serious problems, and it's the way she learned in school. It's a very cold movie as the movie begins. But once the equilibrium is upset and the road journey, the road chase begins, things are stirred up. Whether it's because of the mother's death, the threesomes getaway, or the possibility of careers being destroyed, the true nature of the frozen relationships comes to the surface, and the blame game starts to happen. And it is messy. You all know how that goes. When frozen people bump up against each other and know what needs to happen, but the other is not willing to change, we go to that easy place of blame. Vincent blames his father for his mother's death. His father blames Vincent for his wife's alcoholism that led to the death. The therapist blames the unwillingness of her patients to change for her inability to progress in her field. The father blames Vincent and his deceased wife for holding his political fortune back. All these fugitives blame each other for not truly understanding them. You don't understand me, they proclaim. Now, if all this coldness and all this blaming were the only thing in the movie, it would be a pretty sad movie indeed. But as the road trip or the chase ensues, and more complications happen, and plot twists slow down the inevitable confrontation of these two cars and the people in them, the characters begin to work through the blame and see each other and themselves as real and complex and precious. That's what happens when you begin to see past the cold exteriors that people put up. When you take the time and take the risk to see that rich, complex person behind the facade. Care slowly replaces judgment. No, care slowly replaces conflict. Love replaces lethargy. And joy replaces judgment. Are all the problems these characters have solved at the end of this movie? No, not at all. But finally, there is a chance for honest movement in that direction when you see someone as the complex, rich, warm person they are behind the facade. That's when you can begin to deal with the problems. So at this point, the double entendre the multiple meanings of the movie's title, Vincent Wants to See, becomes evident. Yes, Vincent wants to see the world as his family has always prevented him, but he also wants to be seen as a real person, not defined by his physical disability. They have protected him from years of fear and fear of embarrassment by his illness. Yes, Vincent wants to go to the sea, that beautiful body of water that represents for him freedom and unrestrained abandonment. But Vincent also wants to be seen as a child of God, a human being, someone more than his disabilities, more than those tics and outbursts that people only want to look at and make fun of. And as life has its way, the challenge to see goes both ways. Vincent is urged to see others more deeply. He has painted his father and even his dead mother on a very one-dimensional or two-dimensional plane. He must see them as real people as much as he wants to be seen as real. Jesus and his disciples encountered once again a man born blind from birth. And the very first question out of the disciples' mouth, not even out of the mouths of strangers, is who sinned, this man or his parents? They go right for the jugular, the blame game. Why is he blind? He must have sinned. It shows that even the disciples could not see beyond this man's illness, his deficiencies, his physical attributes. And neither could they see anything beyond their own hypercritical religious views. The blame game is not a new phenomenon, and it is not, nor are people of faith immune to it. Relating illnesses to natural disasters, even things like political ideologies to something that happens on the other side of the world is well tried and is done in our day too. In so many ways, we want to remain blind to the depth and the complexity of the world around us, particularly those who are different from us, who represent the other, the lesser, the farther away, the more demanding, the more complex, the enemy. But Jesus always asks something different of us. He asks us to spend just a little bit more time with the people that he knows and loves and cares about. Jesus wants all of us to see with our eyes, yes, but with the eyes of our heart. That is why the Apostle Paul prays that we might be given a spirit of wisdom and revelation so that the eyes of our hearts might be enlightened to the hope to which we were called. We are called not simply to bring sight to the blind. Yes, we are called to bring sight to the blind, but to be healed of our own blindness, particularly our spiritual blindness. For Jesus understands that simply having full use of these two orbs in our head does not mean that we can see what is right and good and worthy and true and noble. It takes intentionality, it takes time, it takes energy, it takes faith to see deeper. In John's Gospel, when he talks about seeing, almost always he is talking about something more than just light going through our eyeballs. He's talking about believing. To really see in John's Gospel is to believe. And to believe in people is what Jesus is calling us to in this. Jesus knew that the man who was sitting by the roadside was not the only one who needed to be healed from blindness that day. Maybe not even the one who needed it the most. So how do we see people like Jesus more and more? How do we see more than just the obvious surface that people show to us? It is a very, very cold world because very few of us take the time to even think that that is an issue. But we need to come outside into the light. We need some light and some warmth, oh God. We need to leave the cold darkness of our fear-driven, comfort-focused, prejudice supported dwellings into the warm, healing rays of God's marvelous light. Jesus declared to the disciples and to the man born blind, "As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." John's gospel proclaims of Jesus' incarnation, "What has come into being in him was life, and the light was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it." Jesus healed the man of blindness and then turned to the more difficult task at hand, and that is to heal the blindness of his disciples and those around him, to bring all of us into God's marvelous light. It will be hard because they and we are terribly committed to seeing the world as we've always seen it. It is so much easier that way, to see people just like our parents saw them. Like a mole deep in a hole, we've made our home out of the comforts and the darkness of our sin-driven, judgmental attitudes about who deserved God's love and healing and who doesn't, and how that healing should come and how it should be dispensed. That we cannot even begin to truly fathom the warmth of God's light and love, no matter how many times we sing of it. Unless we live it, it is not real. We must come into the light of God's grace, which doesn't demand that people check their personhood at the door in order to be loved, but simply and profoundly loves us for who we are, God's beloved children. The Baptist preacher Tony Campolo tells a great story of flight on a plane. While getting onto the plane, there is a young girl with her father, with her mother. And all the girl can say is, "I'm going to go see Daddy. I'm going to go see Daddy. I'm going to go see Daddy." So I don't know, he didn't know why they had been separated, but clearly this little girl was going to go see her daddy. Well, she was great on the plane. She was laughing and everybody had a joyful time. But she kept saying, "Did you know, I'm going to go see Daddy." Well, just near the very end, as they were lowering in altitude and heading into the airport, they hit some turbulence. And that little girl, as good as she had been up to that point, could not hold back. And breakfast, along with the soda and all the peanuts that she had eaten on the plane, came right back up. Well, it was so close to landing that there really wasn't a chance for the stewardess to do anything. She was strapped in already. Stewardess, that's an old-fashioned word. Well, anyway, the flight attendant. So, they had to get off the plane with this little girl with her spoiled dress. Well, as noxious as it was to Tony Campolo, he still hung near them because he wanted to see. She had been so excited to see her daddy. What was Daddy going to think of this? Because it was bad. Well, as you might imagine, the moment that father saw the little girl off the jetway, he ran to her and hugged her tightly without missing a beat, without blinking an eye. And Tony was reminded, as we are, that's exactly how God looks at us. God does not spend one moment of judgment. The judgment comes, but not from God's love. God just receives us warmly and lovingly. Vincent wanted to see. He wanted to see the sea. He wanted to be seen for who he was. And he learned how to see people in their own right. Beloved, let us allow the love of God to thaw our often cold and hard hearts, so that once again we can come out of our shadowy, cold abodes and open our light to the light of God's love around us. And let us have the eyes of our heart open, enlightened, have the grace and wisdom to offer that then to everyone we meet. The same warmth, just as Jesus offered to us. And may we see our neighbors not for their disabilities, not for their sinfulness. All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Not for their limitations or their needs or their faults, but to identify everyone as claimed and loved and hugged unquestionably by God, and may the warmth of that love light all of our seeing. Amen.